no kina semdol ka ke mo fa seda.
Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. I am Matterall. Today we're going to talk about Toronto EVE, or EVE North, as it's known for EVE players, and the CSM election that just wrapped up a few weeks ago. The political map changes. We're going to talk about drifter attacks. We're going to talk about the nullsec blackout that's coming. And we'll talk about the war. Welcome back to season 3 of Talking in Stations. We're going to do 21 shows for you over the next few months, I guess. And we have some changes to announce today. I'll get to those in just a second. But first, I want to announce other guys from Talking in Stations. Ashterothi, how are you doing?
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashterothi, and I have been having a ton of fun running invasions.
Awesome. We also have RonUSMC.
Hey guys, happy Sunday.
And Elise Randolph is here. And we still don't have sound from him. We should have made
At
sure.
least in theory.
Yeah.
He's here in spirit.
He can hear us, but it does light up. All right, we'll try to technically fix that. But at least Randolph is here. We'll get his mic fixed up. And I might as well introduce our guest today because I'm really excited about this lineup. Off camera, we have Suitonia.
Hey, I'm Suitonia. I've just come off the most recent CSM.
Awesome. And we also have Dran from Test Alliance.
Howdy, pleasure to be here.
You'll notice he's on a delay. Just ignore that. And we have a new CSM member, Olmeca Gold. How are you doing, Olmeca?
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Okay, so some of the program notes, and then we'll get into the actual content of the show. Talking in Stations is moving into its 3rd season. And I want to report that the first season was great, but the second season was even better in that we had more people listening. We had a tremendous amount. Wow, I sound like a president, don't I? A tremendous amount of goodwill from people. So we have a lot of fans that listen to the podcast, and want to say we're glad to be back and thanks for tuning in over and over. We have something special for podcast listeners, actually. What we've been doing on Twitch is having things called chill streams where we actually just twice a week turn on Talking in Stations and start talking about things that are going on more or less on a daily basis to the last few days. So we're going to put those now on out for podcast listening. So yeah, that's it's breakfast time over here in California where we've had a few earthquakes. We can talk about those later. So we're going to be putting different shows like The Whole Story and The Universe on their own RSS stream, so you can just subscribe to them directly, but we're going to be hosting them and helping them with production. And then we're also going to have a unified TIS RSS that will have all our shows that we're affiliated with, so should be awesome. Great. And we also want to make sure that you get podcasts as quickly as possible. So as soon as the show's over, we're going to go right into editing and try to get that out within hours of broadcasts. And that will be tough, but we'll try to do it. Okay, so let's see if we can make it through the show without an earthquake. California has had a 6.4 and then followed the very next day by a 7.1 earthquake. It's about 100 miles from here, so it's not a damaging earthquake, but it is unsettling in that your house is essentially on a lake for a minute to a minute and a half. It's not a pleasant feeling because things are not moving the way they should, but we'll probably be fine. Okay. So did we sort out Elise's mic? Because he was going to talk about Toronto since he was there.
Yeah, I think so. You guys can hear me well, right?
Yeah. Awesome.
All right, yeah, I just had to kick my mic. It's fine. But yeah, I went to EVE North in Toronto 2 weeks ago or so. and it's my first stop on the Invasion World Tour. Previously, I've gone to like a fan fest, and I've gone to like 5 fan fests and like 6 Vegases because I'm a degenerate. But Eve North, actually, I was super surprised. Everyone I talked to there, it felt like I'd say, and this is just rough numbers here. I'd say like 70% were saying that this is their first Eve meet ever. So it was a whole bunch of new players. The size was pretty good. It felt like 150, 200-ish people. And yeah, it was just kind of great. No one group had like a dominance or anything like that. So everyone was forced to just hang out with one another. There was one, I ran into one Imperium guy who was like kind of sad. He was like, "Yeah, I'm the only Imperium guy here. That NC guy was making fun of me before, but now we're cool." But it was perfect. It felt like a really good, like an old school Eve meet compared to if you've gone to a Vegas or Fan Fest, or it kind of feels like you get the most out of it by being in a big block.
So it wasn't big enough to be clicky?
Yeah, I guess that's what it was. Or it's just, I think it was just diverse enough, right? Because it was big enough to be clicky, but it was just super diverse at the same time. I think Horde had the most people at like 9 or some shit.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, it was really well done, and it was really well organized as well. Like I was shocked, which isn't a knock on any of the the organizers or anything, but it was their first like Eve event, right? So, and it was kind of massive, but it went off all without a hitch. There was like 1 scheduling or 2 scheduling things that couldn't be avoided, but everything else was really, really well done, and it kind of made me want to go to all the other like Invasion World Tour events too. Just the whole mood was like really, it just felt good for some reason, and I got to meet a few of the devs there. I got to meet the CCB Burger, CCB Falcon, and CCB Fozzie. Everyone's favorite, basically. And it was actually quite interesting. I've known Fozzie since he was in PL, right? We played on Alliance tournament teams together. We theory crafted together, and when he first joined CCP as CCP Fozzie, that was my first year on the CSM. And so I've got to kind of live through his growth as a dev, right? He went from Eve's golden boy, right, or CCP's golden boy who could do no wrong, and then kind of turned into a bit of a pariah after Aegisolve, because for some reason players decided to just throw all of that onto him. So I've seen the ups and downs, right? And the first moment I saw him, and I couldn't figure out why at the time, and I was trying to like figure it out the entire time I was there. He looked super excited and exhilarated about Eve. Like just
cool.
more than I've ever seen any other CCPer ever, right? And so I went to all of the events. I was like, oh shit, what are they gonna drop now? Like there's got to be, I don't know, there's got to be something good that he's going to lay out there. And it was like, oh, here's a nerf to VNIs, here's some cool art shit. And I was like, fuck, what are they gonna drop? Like everyone, why does he look so happy? And I was like, okay, maybe I'm like super wrong about this. Maybe he's just happy because he's in Canada, which is his homeland, and he wants to go on vacation or something like that. And the same thing happened to CCB Burger when I met him. And he's always kind of jolly, but he was like even more jolly than usual. And he's seen my naked ass before. So, I mean, that's kind of the top. So he peaked that. And I was like, man, what are these guys so excited about? And then I guess after we got home, like they did the drifter thing. I was like, oh, maybe that's what they're excited about. And then they did the blackout thing. I'm like, shit, maybe that's what they're excited about. I have no idea. Like I have absolutely no idea what else is in store.
And then the asset safety hints, right?
Yeah, but so they were like overwhelmingly excited and positive, and the vibe was very cool. It was very invigorating, right? So if you were someone that was kind of out of it on Eve and you're like, a little burned out, kind of feel like you've seen it before. The Eve North meet was incredibly well done and just a breath of fresh air, I guess, with different types of people. Also got to meet Katia Say. He was there. He was handing out cool swag as well.
He's the one that went around all of the systems in EVE Online, the 7,000 of them.
Yeah, he was very much of a rock star there, right? So, like, I don't know if you've gone to if other people had gone to any other Eve meets, but generally you kind of see people that are kind of like, I don't want to say Eve celebrities, but they're kind of like known in Eve circles, right? So if
Like-
you see the Matani walking around Vegas, there's like a group of people walking around them, right? This is like
or like
posse.
you.
No, not
Yeah.
maybe me like 4 or 5 years ago, but not
People
me
are
now.
sitting there talking, pointing at you, and they're saying, "That's Elise Randolph over
Yeah, they're
there."
probably trying to throw a shoe at me.
It's still you, buddy. I have a picture of me and you framed. I mean, it's not on my desk, but it is framed.
But anyways, that's who Katia Say was the entire time. Like everyone was just like, "Oh shit, there he is." They kind of figured it out. And also the Space Pope was there, obviously, and he was in full garb. So he kind of was a big cloud there. He gave a great talk, by the way. You should definitely watch it. It's on YouTube. But yeah, I was excited about Eve North. Going in, I was kind of like, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little meh on Eve. I was like, it's a good game.
Mhm.
And going out, I instantly played for like 40 hours.
So it got you pumped up.
Yeah, it
quick
did.
question.
It did.
Quick question. I think CCB Fozzie is somebody that everybody pretty much knows, but CCB Burger is not really been introduced very many times. So can you talk about who he is and why he's so important, real quick?
He's the creative director at Eve Online, right? So he does a lot of cool stuff. And actually, I've had a kind of a nice chat with him. Unfortunately, got interrupted a little bit. Just kind of like his mindset on how to make changes into a game. So he came from architecture, right? So instead of software. So the way he described it to me is, when in my previous job, whenever someone would make a mistake, something would break and it would destroy everyone's work for like months on end, and that one mistake would be completely crippling. But in software, when you make a change, like I don't know, some other, like if you want the drifters to attack, or if you want a null like blackout or anything like that, you can make a change like that without completely destroying the whole product. So maybe there's like room for experimentation more than people being super scared. So that's kind of like, I read into it a little bit about what he said, obviously. So that's like my narrative spin on it. But who knows? Maybe that's what the next few months have in store for us.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks for that rundown on Eve North that just happened in Toronto. That was, if you don't know, and if you should know, but if you don't know, this year CCP decided they were going to take FanFest closer to the actual people. So they've been doing it all over the world, everywhere from Australia to Russia to the East Coast of North America. And that was the Toronto one. That was called Eve North. Later, you'll see Eve London, and you'll also see Eve Vegas.
Yeah, and
And
so
Eve at home.
G Fleet is the next one, which is in, I think, Berlin, and
I thought Eve at home was the next one.
Well, the next one the people can go to will be G Fleet. That's Berlin.
I think we lost Elise's voice.
Yeah. I think we lost your voice again. Something must have gotten unplugged. All right. Well, we'll wait to get him back. But yeah, you can check out all those things. Again, that's this year. Now, something that was announced during, it was highly anticipated, was the election of the new CSM for this year, which are player representatives to the company. Now, you can see why that's important because of last week's events. When players get all riled up, the CSM is supposed to be able to be a conduit to CCP, basically the player representatives of the group, the larger group being all the players of EVE Online. So in that election, there was one major surprise, and that was not that Olmeca got elected, but how strongly he got elected. He was elected, he got more votes than Test was able to put up for Villy. And so of all the block candidates, he came in third behind Aerith and Gobbins. Now, Gobbins and Aerith both benefit from all their players voting, or a huge amount of players that follow their organizational structure. They're in their corporation, alliance, and coalition. So for a guy without a coalition to get number 3, that is astonishing. that is the biggest CSM victory I have seen since CSM 5, when blocks weren't really interested.
I can say that it was a very big surprise from me to see Olmeca now, but not in a bad way as much as he was like the long shot. He was the guy that I thought had a great platform, but I just didn't think he would be able to get the amount of votes. So, I was very happy to see him elected, just so I can stop hearing about the null sec dominance, right? So, so at least there's one guy that's not a part of the big null sec groups that is in uh, on the CSM to kind of voice that opinion, and he's very honest. I thought the timing of his video was excellent. Wasn't sure about like the last 30 seconds, little, but I thought the video was great, and he's also a streamer. So, but I was very surprised to see him get elected.
All right, so Elise and I are both having mic problems because my mic went out in the middle of that. But again, Olmeca, CSM winner, came in third place ahead of Tests, which has a lot of people as well. Test candidate being Villy, and that was a dominant win. Olmeca, how'd you do it, man?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. To be honest, I expected to be the long shot as well. So I expected either I or Exuki going in again inside the CSM, because I think we share a overlapping player base, voter base. I didn't expect all three of us, me, Steve, and Exuki, going on. That was I think that was toward a healthier representation. So that was a good thing, I think. But that was unexpected even for me. The video, I've been working on it for a while, but this last year I decided to convert it into a CSM campaign material. It's basically like I designed it as a documentary, but at the end I added the CSM bit. I think the timing was right. The timing has to be a few weeks before, so it has to be still fresh, but it has to give time for big alliances and big people with influence to watch it and then to decide to guide their people into voting for me. So that in that way, timing is important. You cannot just release it in the beginning of the election and so on and so forth. I think what happened here is there was a buildup of sentiment and in EVE players, and not just players. I am known to be operating in Goon swarm space and killing a lot of stuff in there, and I show it in the video as well. But I'm not talking about only enemies of Goons. I'm talking about whoever identifies themselves as a whaler, because I do in the video. So that just means going after PvE ships in nullsec, particularly expensive ones, but also cheap ones as well, like mining barges and so on and so forth. People who like this kind of content kind of have seen their playstyle invalidated last few years. And I talk about how a lot in the video and in my Reddit AMA and in my document, which is 18,000 words. So I think this all came together. So some people voted for me because I'm an expert in my field. Some people voted for me because I kill goons and they don't like goons. And I think a lot of people voted for me because they have believed in the vision of EVE balance that I also advocated. Besides the video, the video was just a teaser of that, but I had a huge document and huge AMA thread with lots of questions answered, and I put it out there what I think about EVE balance, and I think lots of people like that. So these all came together.
Okay, so something else that was interesting that was pointed out by Suitonia. Suitonia actually was on a show saying that it was going to be very interesting, the CSM election, because you had a heavy block vote, but all the candidates that were leaving, all the incumbents that would have had a built-in advantage that were leaving, were basically community people. So there was going to be a community vote that was up for grabs, which I thought was very interesting. And that seems to be something that you were able to capitalize on as well as Steve Renukin, who actually was an incumbent that did come back.
That's true. I think Yintan's. Oh, sorry, you cut there, so I entered the.
Oh,
okay. You can continue. Your microphone cut it.
no, it's my mic. I guess it doesn't hold. I have a silent mouse, so they're a little weaker than normal, but it doesn't have the clicking noises. But all that to say that Steve Renukin made it by 14 votes. He beat Sword Dragon out for the last spot.
That's true. So I think Yintan and Suitonia leaving kind of paved the way, opened the path for me to get a lot of votes. I think we would have a lot of, because we do have a lot in common in our ideas of rebalance. And I think me doing well also contribute to it. Steve's getting elected and Exuki's to some extent. I ran different simulations where I do worse and worse. I barely make it, for example, on the election software, the tally. And if I got like 500 less votes, Steve wouldn't be elected. And if I got a lot less votes, so I would need a lot of my a lot of the votes that place me in the second place and the third place, then in that case there is a chance that Exuki doesn't get elected. So it looks like there's this interesting interaction between people with overlapping bases. So if you have an ally, you better have him successful, so a lot of the votes trickle to you instead. So I think that's a good thing. Like if we mobilize the people that are outside nullsec mega empires, then that kind of trickles and more people get selected. In the same way how nullsec kind of mobilize their people and add each other to their ballots to optimize the top amount of people get elected from nullsec.
All right. Thank you. Another interesting thing, because during that whole process of people getting elected to CSM was the negotiations behind the scenes on who would have what place on the ballots. We call them ballots, but they're actually more slates. So a group like the Imperium would put forward a slate of candidates that you would vote for in order. Test would do the same. NC actually did it this year, and PL did it this year, which was a surprise. And one of the people negotiating that kind of stuff was Dran. And Dran was actually, I talked to him myself, very, very good. So he was able to get his test candidates, basically test alliance candidates, on many ballots in very high positions. Do you have anything that you want to say about that, Dran?
Yeah, I mean, it was my first time doing that this year. We tried to run a candidate last year. Many of you will remember that didn't end all that well. Test has a very, very storied history of fucking up the CS. And this year, we finally had a strong candidate in Vili that we really wanted to put a lot of support behind. So it's really an interesting dynamic, because a lot of people don't realize that all of the major blocks, or at least most of them, genuinely care who gets put on the ballot. Like they tend to avoid the mean candidates. They tend to avoid the candidates that they think don't have good opinions, or whatever. They won't spite other coalitions or other alliances that they don't like. They won't spite the greater CSM based on the candidates' affiliations. And so it's a really interesting dynamic of, okay, so we have 2 or 3 candidates that we really want to get on. Of the rest of the 35 or 45 or however many candidates there were, 15 of them, 17 of them, we would find acceptable. So in terms of, what influence can we really make with our 7 through 10 slots, as long as they're candidates that we would find acceptable, you reorder the positioning a little bit based on how much other alliances or other coalitions are willing to put your guys up. So it's a really interesting dynamic of trying to order them in a way that you want, but also realizing that ordering them in the order that you want may not necessarily be productive to getting the people that you want on because of the way it trickles and getting slot trades around. Because if you don't end up doing those trades, you get one candidate on. Your second and third candidate, in our case, Dunk Dinkle, probably wouldn't have gotten on. And you could potentially have ended up with somebody that we would have liked a lot less. So it's really weird to have to try to.
Oh, did he freeze?
There's a lot of cutting off today.
Yeah, Dran, we just lost you for the last couple seconds.
Yeah, just the last few seconds.
I'm sure it's just because of the earthquake. It breaks the series of tubes beneath the ground that is the internet.
Are you sure it's not the drifters?
I mean, they might be doing blackout to podcast too. Maybe they're just saying, screw it, we're gonna hit everything.
Yeah.
Are you back, Dran? He might be getting delayed.
But yeah, the CSM actually has changed quite a lot. When I ran for the CSM, it was literally just like, hey, vote for one guy. If you like that guy, maybe he'll get on. Easy. Now it's like favor trading between coalitions to see who gets what spot. So it's a very Eve-like change for an elected body.
Yeah.
I also think this year there was a lot of consternation about the null blocks, like this whole thing about how much the null blocks have everything locked down and all that kind of stuff. And I wonder how much that spurred a counter reaction that led to more people voting for those kind of non-block candidates as a way of trying to preserve the CSM from being 100% secured by nullsec and therefore not representing anything outside of the big blocks.
I mean, a lot of, voting actually finally went up this year, right? So more people voted this year than last year, which is a great thing to see in EU, right? You always want more people voting. It also makes STD way better when more people vote because it kind of drowns out any block type things. But I think the no blocks will be happy with what they got. They got more than half of the or about half, I guess, of the CSM.
Suitonia, how you've been keeping track of this? How high? How much higher did it go this year?
I think I remember it being 28% higher than last year. 28% more people voted this year as opposed to last year, which is interesting because the number of concurrent players has gone down by about 5 to 6k, but the voting's actually gone up by 28%.
Oh, what do you think that means?
One of my biggest concerns for the integrity of the election
I asked Suitonia a question though. What do you think that means? Do you have any conclusions about the stats?
Oh, I think as Ashterothi was talking about earlier, I think that there was a lot more independent votes this time around. I think a lot more people who aren't in null blocks are starting to take the CSM a lot more seriously.
Go ahead, Ash. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to answer the question too. Sorry. So I have a big concern about the impact of SP farms and their ability to vote with as many votes as an entire alliance. So this practice has accelerated over the last 2 years. And so I am concerned that a portion of that increase in voting is simply because individuals are now voting with the scale of corporations or alliances.
We had 300 new votes just among two people.
Oh, wild. Do we have Dran back? Do you want to finish what you were saying, Dran?
Where did I cut off? I have no idea what happened. Discord just changed my input and output devices for no reason.
The last thing that you mentioned was how just a few votes, like a few votes less, Dunk Dinkle, a few votes more, and you were kind of at the end of switching and swapping votes between all the big alliances.
Yeah, it's I guess to finish that up, it's interesting to try to make those trades, but still end up with a ballot that you're, because at the end of the day, as much as you want to support your own candidates, it's more important for most groups that they don't put on candidates that they think would be unhealthy for the game, right? You're not going to slot trade with somebody to give your guy a leg up to spite the greater community.
Well, one of the things that was interesting is you had a second candidate, Kornak, I think, and
We
you
did,
placed
yeah.
him pretty high. And that,
Yeah.
I think your diplomacy really put him to be one of the last guys eliminated. It was really interesting to watch.
Yeah, it was. We did the best we could, right? I mean, you never really know how votes are going to fall. You more importantly never really know how much voting power a trade will actually get you. So we put him on a lot of external ballots. We put him on. He was number one on most legacy and legacy affiliated ballots that wasn't test or already voting for Dunk as number one. So it's a weird balancing act. There were definitely some alliances that, we were counting on for 50, 60 votes that put up 200. And there were some alliances we were counting for 200 that put up literally 9. It's
wow.
Yeah, because you can actually figure out who voted for what if you give everyone unique ballots. So all of the alliances that we had handed out ballots to all had slightly different ballots. So by the time the voting all went through, we could go through and look, okay, so there were 2,500 that went in the test top 5 order, so those were probably test ballots. There were 3,100 that did the test top 3 order with all of the test ballot, but 1 or 2 substitutions. There were 30 or 40 that did this alliances, 30 or 40 that did this alliances, and yada, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You could see where Fraternity was voting by, because they had Sword Dragon as number 2, Goblins as number 1, and you could just see the roll off, a huge amount of votes going to Sword Dragon, kept them in competition to the very end.
Yes, it did.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry.
Let me just move on, because we want to move on from this. This was something that happened 3 weeks ago, but the strong finish by Olmeca had a lot of people saying that, well, the only way that could happen is if he engaged skill farmers who have a ton of accounts and said, I'll pay you money if you make all your accounts vote for me. So Olmeca, is there any truth to that? And if so, it's not necessarily a good or bad thing, but is there any truth to that?
No, yeah, I would own it if if it was true. I know some other candidates bought votes and added me in some place. I didn't buy my own votes. We had 250 between Marshy and me, and I have 2 other close friends who have a similar amount. One of them put me in the first position and didn't put anyone else. So there was like some spooky 450 solo Olmeca votes, right? I think they were really suspicious. But then when you actually buy votes, you want to give people pre-made ballots so you can actually confirm that they voted as arranged, right? So you don't want to give them, you don't want to say, look, just vote for Olmeca vote, because you never know who is that person. At any rate, so I didn't pay. I know some candidates that did that and added me, and we had a lot of accounts our own. And I think some 350 people just added me and nobody else.
Wild. So yeah, you came in with over 3,000 votes in first position, which is astounding. That's the kind of numbers you'd expect from a group as the size of Test and stuff. All right. Well, thank you guys for talking about CSM elections. There's interesting breakdowns here. Maybe we'll actually analyze the voting structure and how it happened with Olmeca and Dran and others. I didn't give Suitonia much of a chance to talk, but now you're finished. You're now a CSM alumni. You're all finished with CSM. What's it like to be free?
Oh, nice! I can be more of a troll on the forums again.
Now you don't have to represent the company anymore.
I did notice that you've been catching up for lost time.
We'll get to that in a second, because he wrote some stuff on Reddit, and we'll talk about those articles in just a second. One last thing is the CSM has actually just met for the first time, I think a few days ago. So they're just now getting indoctrinated into the process. Okay, let's move on, if we can, to nullsec and go around the map and talk about where troops are moving and where politics are happening. I think we'll start up in Tribute because we've had a war there that was winding down a few weeks ago. Who can talk about that? Elise, is that something you're familiar with?
I mean, Tribute's gone. So anything that we had there is gone. It's great. PLNC, they're kind of knew it was happening, but they still got glassed over, like as expected. So props to the Imperium for winning that one. There were some fights, there were some skirmishes, but NC and PL were super opportunistic with them, which had to be quite frustrating. But the Imperium just glossed over the entire region. Like, it's all gone. There's nothing left. Mogul Financial even got caught in the crosshairs.
Oh, yeah.
So Mogul Financial just got completely eliminated. They gave their remaining structures to the Sixth Empire, which is Max Singularity's group. So, yeah, I mean, completely and utter domination in terms of structure removal. Yeah, it's all gone. All the infrastructure is gone.
Okay, so the Imperium invades north. They're going to take out NCPL and everybody in the north that's not Sword Dragon, because Sword Dragon is like, hey, I can't stop you, so go past me, whatever. And the Imperium says we're going to take out Eve Mogul because they have facilities up here in the north that build stuff for the north, so we're going to wipe those out. In fact, we're going to wipe him completely out. And before they can finish, the Drifters start to attack. So they did finish with the north, but they didn't finish with Eve Mogul. Eve Mogul is trying to negotiate his way through. And before the Imperium can actually finish off Eve Mogul, they end up having to go home. And we'll talk about the Drifters in a few minutes. But what happens to NCPL after their regions get destroyed?
So it kind of acts as a catalyst for something that's been on the back burner for quite a while that I think is just now starting to get announced. I don't know how much has been leaked of it yet, but essentially NCPL, Horde, and all their boroughs are going to go to a more central location in drones, and they're all going to be based out of this one area, kind of similar to SH1. That was kind of what it used to be in Tribute. But now, instead of having 40 or 50 systems under the umbrella, there'll be 200 something systems, which should give a lot of it just gives those groups the ability to have a super cap umbrella under a lot of space. So it just they're kind of doing what the Imperium did back in the day after they lost the North. They went to Delve and started just farming like crazy. And so now PL and NC and Horde will have the opportunity to do that. A lot of the fallow space now, that is Geminate, Tribute, T-Null, all that, I think is going to be transitioned over to Renters, which should be interesting. Who knows how that's going to work?
We'll see. So,
Elise, what do you think about the drone lands? I know historically it's just always been kind of talked about in a bad way, but I've always thought that it was great. And won't it bring down the price of excavators?
Probably not. I don't know. The drone lands is an odd region because it kind of came into pass after the game was already decently well established. Like, the space didn't exist, and then everyone had space, and then just these drone lands came out of nowhere. Instead of NPCs, they have instead of bounties, they drop stuff that you get money out of and materials. It's actually how a lot of groups started out building their super capital armadas, because you can't really. Before Rorquals made mining super easy, it was hard to get that many minerals without doing like the mind numbing, just random bullshit that is mining. But yeah, so these things, the actual NPCs, they drop stuff that turns into minerals. You can put a tax on that because you can have everyone go to a refinery and do that type of thing. So you get a lot of minerals out of the whole deal. It has some of the best true sec. I think Malpace has the best true sec of any region in the game, the best average true sec, that is. And so all of those systems will be under the super capital umbrella of this new NCPL Horde group. So I mean that'll be good. I think it's really good space. The 1010s blow obviously, but everything else is good.
And so Horde made the change too. They're actually moving out of Geminate and moving closer to NCPL in Kalevala. Let me look up that name.
Yeah, well, I mean the kind of it made this a lot easier when Capco's group Skill Yourself decided to say, screw it. And they gave the bird to Eve and just dropped all the solve. So instead of having to kind of do anything about it, PL and NC and Horde can just be like, oh, look, what's this? Free space?
Yeah, it seems a lot of it was absorbed by Fraternity, who sits in the south, but NCPL is inheriting a lot of that space, coming into it, taking it over. How much of Skill U's decision to take off was based on them knowing that NCPL were moving into the neighborhood?
I don't think they care too much. I think they were just like, we're done with it. We burned out. This game's not for us anymore. And they took a very extreme approach at it. A lot of the people ended up joining Fraternity, though.
Yeah, basically their entire alliance is in Fraternity now, and I mean they were always a cult of personality, and cults of personality rather than cults of culture tend not to last more than a year or two, regardless of success. It's just the nature of how those alliances live and breathe.
So cult of personality means when you follow one or two charismatic leaders, when they get tired and leave the game, it's hard to hold that group together.
Right, yeah.
I have a question for clarification, which is that it was my understanding that drones no longer drop the refinables, but actually have bounties now. Is that true?
I mean, probably.
Does anyone know?
Yeah, it got changed a long time ago. I think it got changed in
Yeah.
like 2015 or something.
Yeah, they drop bounties. I think that they're comparable to everyone else's. It's just the flavor of rats and the other stuff that they drop, the region-specific stuff, that's still significantly less desirable than other regions.
What I was trying to say though is before Oracle mining became a thing, the big draw to drones was that you can get a lot of minerals quite easily.
Yeah,
now
well,
with now I mean with oracles and stuff like that, you can just mine the colossal.
I think
Yeah, honestly, the biggest draw to the region now is how densely packed the systems are. You know, if you look at the alliances and coalitions that have done in the last couple of years since the Citadel change and the super carrier jump changes, is you have a central staging and maybe a midpoint, and anything underneath that umbrella is functionally your this is ours. Anything outside of that umbrella is this is potentially ours. And the more people you can cram underneath that, the more alliances you can cram underneath that, the denser packed the space is, the stronger your group can come, because you can flex further than other groups with lessly dense space. Goons really struck a gold mine in Delve a couple of years ago before anybody else had figured that out.
I think it's kind of unfortunate, but it's true that there is basically one empire model that's left that is competitive, and it's exactly what you said. I was going to make the same comment, like cram as many people in the single area and protect them with the umbrella. And it has a lot of negative changes given the rest of the environment, because when people look for content, actually all they see is either vast amount of space with VNI bots or regions in which you'll get counter dropped 50, 100 Titans or Supers, and then there's nothing in between, right? So that's
don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here praising this as the be all end all, the most fun way Eve has ever been played. But I think it's hard to argue mechanically that it's not the optimal strategy. Yeah, I think that's a little unfortunate.
Absolutely, and the issue here is probably what I expect is if local changes remain permanent, it would make a similar effect, cramming a lot of people into 3 or 4 mega empires and nothing in.
All right, let's get into that in just a second. First, I want to ask either Dran or Ron, like what's going on in Test and Fraternity Theater of War.
Well, I mean, I love
you wanna take
drifters,
it?
and Dran
Go.
does too.
God, yeah, we're gonna have some fighting words this stream, my friend.
Well, don't get too far into drifters. We're doing that next.
Yeah, we'll skip drifters for now. The Fraternity Theater has always been not to say that it isn't fun or eventful, but it's by nature going to be very, very slow because of jammer changes. Really, the new jammers are another defensive swung tool in an already toolkit very heavily favoring defenders. So even if you have reasonably comparable FCs or reasonably comparable numbers in any time zone of the game, any day of the week, it's always going to be a very, very slow grind of attrition to burn your way through an enemy like that if they're not something that you can just throw Titans down and not have anybody around that can contest it. If there's any reasonable field of contention, it's as fast as you're going to go. But we have a lot of guys doing really really fun small gang stuff. You drop a couple of Citadels, and I say a couple. You drop 50, and maybe 30 of them online. You use them as bases of staging for a couple of days. Then they get blown up. Then you drop 50 more, and that's just the meta that we're under right now. But we've taken, I want to say, 3 or 4 systems in the last couple of weeks that have given us decent footholds. It is pushing them back as far as we can tell, and hopefully it'll give us a theater that'll be a little bit more dynamic than just the brick wall of what we've been running into right now.
And I think a lot of that is sort of the changing face of war, or the current kind of war mechanics, because it's very much like a border skirmish, right? Where we have these constant fights and constant timers, but I think the viewers, as they're looking and they hear war, they're expecting Titan battles and super battles and and these huge keepstar things, but it's kind of like just pushing sand. And I think we have 5 systems, but I mean, we took 3 iHubs last night alone, and that's one night, so we might lose those iHubs in the next few days. But as I've always stated, Sino jammers hate fun. So as we kind of push and pull into that, and with all the new skill U talent, all the new higher than Everest talent, I mean, these guys are smart. I mean, they're great players. They have great FCs over there. So baiting them is very much the sort of very high level meta that it's very difficult to do. So they're not going to do the mistakes that they were doing a year ago, or a year and a half ago, these kind of very simple kind of mechanics mistakes, because they've got Elo like there, and they've got Harvey there, and these guys that really know what they're doing. So we're just pushing and pushing, but we are making progress every week.
Right. Okay, so moving on then real quick to the bottom of the map, you'll see the Imperium had to come back to deal with the drifters. They weren't sure at first how pervasive they were going to be and how damaging they were going to be. So they came back and started to defend themselves against the drifters. And we'll pick it up there now with this drifter invasion. Ashterothi, can you talk us through real quick what that looked like from the beginning to where we are now?
Sure. Just real quick. On Wednesday, a week ago, last Wednesday, really, I was just starting up my stream and didn't really have anything to do. And somebody brought to my attention an image of a bunch of drifters bashing a Tatara. And from that, we started getting reports pouring in. It seems as if the initial strike was 3 keep stars, important to 3 major alliances, Test, Fraternity, and I think Horde was the third. And from there, we started to see repeated ongoing attacks by large-scale drifter forces that a lot of people were upset about. And then after that, within the next week, there was a transition and things changed. But generally speaking, for the last 2 weeks or so, there's been almost ongoing attacks by this AI force that at first was attacking structures, but not necessarily going for the reinforcements, but now appear to be very much picking on ratters and anoms and that kind of stuff. So there is this omnipresent threat throughout all of nullsec at the moment.
And also, just NPCs in general have been doing some wacky shit too, right? So drifters have been fighting Triglavians over timers, and Sanchas have been around as well. Like I've seen some Sancho fleet that dropped onto a structure and then got attacked by drifters, and just a whole bunch of random shits going on between the AIs.
Yeah, so mechanically...
the Semiki, which is a high-sec system owned by Arataka Research, or the Citadel was owned by Arataka Research Consortium, was hit by a bunch of Sancha. And then those Sancha was attacked by drifters. But the difference is that it appears to be that what's going on with the drifters is completely automated. But that event, as well as the Crimson Raiders, the Blood Raiders that are have been attacking in Amar. Recently, when the Amarian defenders, i.e. the role players that are supporting Amar, tried to take out one of the Blood Raiders' fobs, they got dropped on by a whole bunch of dreads. Now, the difference between those two events and the ones happening in Null is, as I said, the ones in Null seem to be automated and being run through like a certain formula or rules that we don't really know about yet. But those other two events, the ones in HiSec, were almost certainly done by CCP, like hand done by members like Delegate Zero.
Well, we do know a little bit more than that. I've been with the group that's been kind of analyzing the drifter attacks and figuring out what they. Early reports were worthless, frankly. It took us at least a day to figure out that, or it took us almost a full day to figure out that we weren't, that this wasn't even a bug, or that we weren't under attack by somebody exploiting drifter escalations and kiting them into citadels as a griefing tactic. But once we had figured that out and started talking around the horn to all of the other groups, the initial attacks, what they seem to be, is they seem to be a little bit of copy pasta code from the Garista's Satios. The way that the Satios drop, a Satio appear in a system, fleets will appear from those Satios and warp to gates or structures and sometimes bash them, but they were always very, very weak, those rats were. The drifters, upon later analysis, almost follow that playbook identically. It wouldn't surprise me if physically in every system during that first, that initial week, if there wasn't an invisible, unprobable Satio that was spawning these rats with a slightly higher frequency than, I say slightly, like 20 or 30 times as high, but a slightly higher frequency and just tuning and spawning different rats. But mechanically, they were almost identical. It wasn't until phase 2 that it got really different.
Well, that's very interesting. I will say that things like the Sodio and the FOBs and the mining fleets are actually secondary projects or products that have come out of the development of their new AI that they've been working on for like 4 years, which has been mostly surrounded around the drifters. So it makes sense to me that they behave the same, because the Sodio behavior is actually derivative from the drifter behavior.
Yeah, and that's what we assume too. No reason to reinvent the wheel if you already have something, but it definitely, once we sort of made that connection, it gave us a lot. It gave us a lot of information to go off of if a couple of assumptions were assumed to be, and by the end it ended up being, if it wasn't that, it was close enough.
Let's move into a discussion so anybody can participate here, but I do want to first bring up Suitonia hasn't really said much. What was your initial reaction to drifters, and what would you say the mood of the player base, a large portion of it that's in the talks through the media and stuff like that, felt about it, and then how did you respond to that?
Oh, I think the initial response was, if is this a bug? Is it like some weird, like new discovered griefing tactic that someone found out? And then I think as it progressed, a lot of people were making assumptions on it was like CCP doing it specifically for some game design reason. Like they've suddenly realized that there's too many citadels in the game, and because the initial attacks I think were free keep stars, like you mentioned.
No.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the initial attacks were about 1 to 3 systems per region owned by the 4 major power blocks in the game. So small alliances, I think there were only 2 or 3 total that got hit with a single system. It was the vast majority were in Goon systems. There were about 20 there. There were about 7 test systems. There were, I think, 5 fraternity systems. There were a couple pandemic horde ones. There actually weren't any in test systems that had keep stars. I don't know why people keep thinking that was a thing. It was a fraternity keep star that got hit, and a bunch of systems with goon keep stars that weren't particularly targeted, but just had relatively important keep stars in them. But sorry,
also,
continue otherwise.
And also Horde's keep star and BWF.
Yes, Horde's keep star was also, I believe.
Go ahead, Suitonia.
Yeah, I think the initial response from the Imperium was one of a lot of anger, I think. A lot of players, I think, were laughing about it. A lot of people who are not really politically connected or playing in NullSec, because it is quite amusing, I guess, to see NullSec be taken down a peg a little for those kind of players. And I think a lot of people who are, kind of a bit bitter about the current state of NullSec, so a lot of like small gang groups and PvPers as well were enjoying it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I can really blame that reaction too, with how, I hate to use the word targeted because we don't know, right? CCP said functionally nothing about the entire event besides one scope video that had wrong information in it. I don't know if that was because they made the video and then made some changes, or if they just didn't understand the mechanics themselves when they made it, or what the implications
it's AI. It's AI. Well, it might have a mind of its own.
I want to speak to that real quick. So scope videos are reported from the news. And so what happened was basically, I believe that they based it off of what the initial reports were, right or wrong.
Like that would be cool.
Yeah, the scope has in the past given bad theories. I mean, like when Caroline Star first started, one of the theories they proposed was that it was the herald of the coming of Bob, for example. So
yeah, fair enough. But the way that it was targeted initially, so fraternity on the first day, I want to say got 27, 29. I have to go back through the logs to find it, but somewhere in that ballpark attacks. And the fleets were anywhere between 30 and 70 drifters large, right? Test got hit across, I want to say 7 or 8 different systems. Again, the same 30 to 50 drifters, and we got 42 attacks on the first day. Goons, by contrast, got hit in 20 different systems and over 200 attacks. So before anybody had really even understood the mechanic, people were looking at Test and saying, oh, well, 6 systems got hit like 40 times throughout the day and you dealt with all of them. So if Test can deal with it across 3 different regions, why are Goons undeploying and whining about this when, presumably they're getting hit just as hard, when in reality they were getting hit 8 times as hard as the second biggest entity that was getting hit. And I'm not sure by any metric that Goons are 8 times anything that Test is.
Mm-hmm. So it looked disproportional towards
right. Well, most importantly, it didn't look disproportional to the Imperium because the reports hadn't come out yet. Nobody knew what was happening. Everybody just assumed they were whining.
But they were talking to each other at this point. I mean, that happened right away, didn't it?
Well, sort of. So the large alliance leaders were talking to each other, but nothing really got disseminated to the public because we didn't know what was happening yet, right? We were
But
basically
the leaders themselves would have an idea of how widespread it was and what proportions it was, wouldn't they?
Sort of. It took us about 2 days to compile the information, right? Remember, for the first half of the first day, we all thought, like, I thought it was Fraternity attacking us. I was like, this smells like Elon. This is one of his guys figured out how to escalate a bunch of drifters, got onto my gunners list, kited them into my Ashterothis, and started, generating timers. That's what we thought, and that's what Goons thought for the first 2 or 3 hours. Fraternity thought it was us for a couple of hours. Then, by the second day, then we started talking to each other, but it was still, only talking to allies, right? You don't reach out to blood enemies that you've been fighting wars with for the last 10 years. Hey man, what did the drifter, did you guys get hit by those NPCs? Right?
I mean, you 8,000,000,000% do. I got 5 PMs. I don't even run an alliance anymore. I got 5 PMs from people in Goons, Test, and Fraternity checking to see how much of our shit.
Oh no!
Yeah, I mean, and that did happen on the second day. But that's what I'm saying, right? Just how crazy that is, right? It's you're sitting there with, like, a bunch of your buddies from college or whatever, and it's really cold outside, but none of you brought jackets. You're just like, are you cold? No, man, I'm not cold. I'm doing just fine. Sitting there shivering, and nobody wants to be the guy who is like, yeah, these suck, and they're destroying us. I'm getting eaten alive by NPCs.
Yeah, but Dran, it seemed like the Discord was mounted on day 1 or 2. I may be mistaken, but it seemed like very quickly all of Nullsec was talking to each other, saying this is bad, we don't like it. And
day one, everybody was talking to their allies. By day 2, we were all talking to each other.
Okay, so it was like second day.
But that's still very slow in terms of Nullsec movements. Usually something happens. You already have these communications channels set up with the people you like, so you're talking about things immediately as they're happening.
Gotcha. Okay, so widespread attacks by drifters startled Nullsec. By day 2, they're comparing notes with each other. They create a Discord called, and I'm sure it was a joke, but it's called Null First, kind of like America First. That's what we're thinking. It was a bit of a joke, but Null First kind of sends a message to the rest of the game that you're second. And you just had a CSM that had elected a lot of Null players, with the exception of Olmeca here and a couple others. By the way, we're super happy that Exuki got on since he's a part of TIS. So these things everything's happening really fast, and there's a lot of emotion there. So there's a lot of basically people wanting to talk to each other, trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, so you have to remember in Nullsec, especially the people leading Nullsec, we all came out here because we enjoy the player versus player driven game style. We enjoy fighting each other. We want CCP to give us tools to fight each other. And, once this started happening and we realized that it's not us under attack, it's Null that is under attack. It is the game style that we play that is under attack. That's when it became we should probably start talking to each other and figure out what's going on. Right. Because this is dangerous.
Right. And Suitonia, this is the reaction that you address when you write up your posts on Reddit, right? Something like that?
Yeah, something like that. So I think a lot of people dogpiled on Goons because they had a emergency fireside, which obviously got leaked because, who doesn't have a character in Karma Fleet nowadays? It's like super easy. So that was at, I think, 0200 Eve time, which was about 8 hours after the initial drift attacks. And that was posted on Reddit, I think, like 2 hours later. So
that was only 8 hours after the drifter attacks?
Yeah, I think they started at about 1800 Eve time, around that time. It was like about like 12, like midday, I think, in US time. That's like when the first thing that I saw happened.
Yeah. Well, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, so then the emergency fireside happened for Matani. There was also the ping that he put out, which was like a little antagonistic as well, which sort of riled people up on Reddit. And yeah, I think a lot of people were celebrating them and they were loving them because they represented something that hadn't happened in Null for quite a while, and that was like some change or some unknown danger to NullSec, because for quite a while now with the way the citadels work, like campaigns are much more slower now, especially like even like the Imperium with the largest super fleet that's ever been seen inside the game. It takes them weeks to make progress in like a constellation in Tribute now, just because of like how citadels work, because it takes like a whole week just to siege a single citadel.
Right. What was happening is people were projecting what they wanted on top of what they saw. Right. With how little actual information was out there, people were rallying to the, oh yeah, CCP is breaking up the null blocks, or oh yeah, CCP is dealing with low power citadel spam, or oh yeah, CCP is doing whatever. And I think that actually that says something about the state of the game right now, and it doesn't say something very positive. If people are projecting onto an event the things that they want it to be, the things that they assume it's going to be, in the lack of any better information, and it just being completely wrong.
It seemed like NullSec
what was weird about
also
that?
projecting.
Oh, you die out again, Matterall?
Did I die out again?
Yes, you're good now.
Okay.
I was just going to say that it was so bad that when reality did not reflect their assumptions, the first thing that people jumped to is the fact that it was a bug, right? The fact that structures were not being bashed a second time, that's a bug. The fact, you know what I mean? Like, so people...
They're not taking out botters like they're supposed to.
Right. People decided what it was for, and then when it didn't do those things, they thought that was a flaw in it because their expectations were not being met.
Right. And now that it's, I want to say mostly over, but I'm gonna find something wood to knock on real quick, because. But now that the at least the first two phases are over and we can analyze what it actually was, I still don't know what the intent was. I don't know what problem it set out to solve.
Suitonia, what do you think about this? And what, again, you wrote your article and you were basically saying this is why people like the drifters. You're trying to explain what that was about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just that there are a lot of people who don't like the current state of the game. Like, it's been very heavily leaned on towards people who like to hold space long term, like empire builders, miners, like the PvE people who like to PvE rather than PvP mostly. And a lot of the long term PvP is still kind of there, but it's a lot more like strategic and long term objectives. Like, oh, how are we going to beat goons on the MER in 3 months' time? It's not about like how can we get a fight this weekend. It's a lot of like the shorter term stuff that you can do to affect alliances now is kind of disappeared from the game. You can't entoast station services anymore because they're gone. Because you can choose when a citadel comes out, you don't have weekend timers anymore because of the way the time zone tanking works. Like if you have the best, Chinese time zone in the game, you're never going to put your citadel timers on a weekend because you don't want to open yourself up to letting like an alliance like Pest maybe that has like a stronger US time zone into being able to attack you on the weekends, which they can do because the US players can stay up, or the European players in Test can wake up at 8 a.m. and fight on weekends like Saturday and Sunday. So like a lot of the timers for citadels now, if you have a stronger time zone than your enemy, or you just have a time zone that's really shit for the enemy, sorry for swearing, there's no reason for you not to put it on like a Wednesday or a Thursday or some time where people just can't like bring as many people as they can. And that's like frustrating a lot of people because a lot of people who have like active families, or they have like a demanding job, they can't play Eve on these final timers anymore.
Elise, what's your opinion about this or your analysis? And we have mic problem on Elise. I'll move to Ashterothi. Ashterothi, your view on your analysis of what's going on.
So, to me, the hints that I've picked up on is CCP has said that they want events to change the topology of space and make existent space new again. There's been a lot of calls for the introduction of more space or whatever, but CCP has said that their goal is to make it so that the existent space feels new again. And so the introduction of randomized crises would definitely fall under that category. And I feel that the general sentiment of the game, as has been pointed out, was very much about empire building in Null, and not about how Null is the most risky place and space is scary and Null is unknown. Like, it's been conquered. It was about raising an empire. And I think that overall CCP has decided that time, while not necessarily come to a close, the idea behind it is they need a new challenge to help break things up. And if you're going to do that, you need to do it in such a way that draws everybody's attention to the change. And this is a pretty dramatic way of doing that.
Mm-hmm. Elise, your thoughts?
I mean, it's kind of tricky, right? So I'm not sure exactly why they did it or the reason before it, and people did have very, very intense reactions, right? Especially nullsec people are like, "Hey, this is my home. I don't want you messing with it. I don't want you putting some untested mechanics in here that's gonna force me to come back." I know a lot of people gave goons shit, right? They were like, "Oh, these goons, they overreact to everything." They thought that at the time their whole thing was like, hey, yo, this empire that we built over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, it's going to get killed by NPCs, and you're just mad because players can't actually do it.
Yeah, it's like you're building sandcastles and you're like, hey, don't step on my sandcastle, and you protect it from other people stepping on it, and then the ocean wave comes up and wipes out part of it. You're like,
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
But I don't know.
Mecca,
I
what were
think.
your?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No,
Finish up, at least. Go ahead.
I think CCP were just like, hey, what do you think would happen if we did this? I honest to God believe they're just like, hey, what do you think is going to happen? I don't think they had some sort of crazy ulterior motive. I think they're like, yo, we've got this patch called Invasion. Why don't we just bring the invasion to literally everybody? And they're just having fun with that concept.
Olmeca, what's your analysis of it?
So I'll add this to Suitonia. So people who want to kill structures in nullsec are more frustrated right now, and also people who want to kill ships in nullsec have been frustrated for the last 2-3 years. And again, that's why I got elected with such a good turnout. So these people are celebrating these changes because it looks like CCP finally wants to make nullsec dangerous again. But for example, I polled my own voters. I have a CS Discord server for that, and 60% were in favor. Besides the fact that I said that I wasn't in favor for this. So that's the people. There's a lot of emotional reaction, and people don't think long-term effects of this. And for the long term, what I think, if this remains permanent in the game, what I think about this is basically whatever PvE mechanic you introduce into this game to make nullsec more dangerous, it's gonna get min-maxed, and it's gonna turn into a man-hour tax rather than an engaging play. So it actually taxes the more citadels you have, the more man hours you need to tend to them and defend them from drifters. And in the current implementation, you will need a lot of man hours, particularly if what happened to Delve happens to everywhere else. So I kind of understand why goons reacted in the big way that they reacted. And I'm not, in principle, opposed to man-hour tax. For example, you can think of refueling structures as a man-hour tax, right? You need some sort of manpower to tend to your structures in nullsec. So this is I see this as a similar kind of mechanic that could discourage that could discourage Citadel spam. But I also think the implementation is just too oppressive. And at the end of the day, what I think is the big picture stuff here is that I think NPCs are never the answer to make nullsec more great again, more dangerous again. CCP needs to foster player interaction, more kills, and more people killing each other, interacting each other, and in that way, people will keep remaining in the game. Both sides will keep remaining in the game and playing the game, and it's going to be a sustainable ecosystem. If you keep introducing, the way I see it, basically, whenever drifters kill a ship, that's a ship that hunters could have killed and played the game for.
So I have a question about that.
Wait, before you ask your question, let me just get Ron's analysis on it.
Well, I mean, I don't know if this is the most amazing patch or just an amazing patch. I'm still 50-50 either way on that. But, but let me put this in perspective as well, right? So Test is currently, in kind of like a war mode. So, we're very used to or very, acclimatized right now to responding to timers and getting these things. And while the goons have been deployed up north, and as Olmeca and I have talked about in local, as he's attacking, our oracles, is, Test was really kind of the only organization at the time that had all the steam engines going. So we were getting attacked by random groups, and we were very much in the mode of responding to attacks, and we had our defense fleet going and all this. So when this happened, it really didn't, it wasn't that big of a deal. And then when I saw the drama on Reddit, I thought it was kind of like a meme at first. I thought it was like a joke, because that was just like daily business for us. But then, kind of like wave 2 happened, and 170 plus systems start getting hit, and then it starts spreading people thin. But then we start to adapt, and we get our communication channels, and we get our SIGs going, and everything like that. So I enjoy the new challenge, and I enjoy, the play that it brings. That, it is right now the most dangerous NPC, in nullsec, right? Besides the factions Sotios. I mean, it is. So being able to respond to that and being able to hurt them, I wish it was more rewards, but other than that, I've really enjoyed it, and I've had fun, and you get to hang out with your bros and do stuff. So, I know that's not a popular opinion, but
Well,
I've been enjoying it.
It's a valid opinion, though. All right. So, any last thoughts that you guys want to discuss? I think Ashterothi had a question about the drifters before we move on to Blackout.
Yeah, but now I'm having difficulty remembering it.
I've got one.
Yeah.
I really, the opinion, the thought's been thrown around that maybe they were just doing it to, shake Null up, and there wasn't really a grand thought or design behind it. Although I think that's the most likely, I'm really not a fan of that. For better or for worse, most people that go out into Null, they set out to build something, whether it's a reputation for hunting people, or it's to get your first Titan, or to build the best empire, or, people are building towards something. And just throwing things in for the sake of throwing things in, I'm not a big fan of that. In something that I find a lot of, really too much in real life work, is people set out to make solutions to problems they've never actually sat out and defined, right? I would wager that at no point in any of the discussions around the mechanics did somebody in a CCP boardroom stop the room, silence everyone, and say, okay, but what problem are we actually trying to solve? Because, from the surface, it sounds kind of like, Null is stagnant, and Null is boring, and we want to solve it or we want to solve the major empires by giving them a man-hour tax, or whatever reasons anybody wants to throw out there. But the problem that they should be trying to solve is make Null fun again, right? And does taxing man hours on an empire make Null fun and engaging again? Does breaking up empires through effort attrition make balance through burnout? Like, is that a good direction? Is that fun? I really would like somebody to just ask that question before introducing mechanics. I don't think that's too unreasonable.
Well, CCP Hilmar did say that their big goal is that they feel that nullsec has become too safe and predictable.
Yes.
And this certainly does make it less safe and predictable.
See, I would disagree. I don't think it makes it less safe. Sure, unpredictable. Like, Null would be unpredictable if every time you pressed a jump gate, your ship had a 1% chance of detonating. It doesn't make lack of predictability for lack of predictability's sake, I don't think is necessarily a good thing. It needs to come through, for example, a lack of intel mechanics so people will take more engagements that they might not otherwise. But in terms of making Null dangerous, I don't think it had that effect at all. It stopped every major war in the entire game, save for one, and that was Test and Fraternity. And the only reason we were able to continue the war during that event is because we were both hit the least of other major groups.
What were the other major wars that stopped?
Goons and PL.
Did that really stop it though?
Okay. So
even before that, what other major conflicts were stopped? You said every other major war except ours, and there was really only one, and that one was winding down anyway. So what other major wars were stopped?
I suppose there really only were the two, but it was every other major engagement was sort of a proxy of those two, right? There were entities in Wicked Creek, entities in my geography's failing me, north of wherever Fraternity lives, that had been pressing down on them. When the event started, everybody sort of sat down together and started talking about, well, okay, we have to make this stop, and then we can continue shooting each other. And I don't think that's a good thing.
I kind of agree with the fun point here, because I think CCP, if they did understand it this way, they misunderstand it. To make nullsec more dangerous again, that just means, recently nullsec has changed in a way that defenders have great advantages to defend their ships and their citadels and their structures. And then that kind of reduced the overall fun, because part of the fun in nullsec is killing each other, right? And then now we want people push for a more dangerous nullsec so that the overall fun increases, so that attackers can have fun too. But drifters don't introduce that kind of mechanic where overall fun increases. It just introduces an unfun PvE tax, man-hour tax, and then maybe that's reasonable because there are some other man-hour taxes to balance things, like again, as I said, refueling. But then at this degree of implementation, it's not reasonable.
I mean, is refueling a good mechanic? Like, wouldn't an ideal world be one where you don't have to tax a specific playstyle by prerequisite man hours?
I think there is a lot of man-hour limitations for a lot of playstyles. So
well,
I
sure,
think
but if you look at most of the things that have a lot of man-hour prerequisites, like mining or ratting to build up ships or build up a wallet to be able to buy the things that you want, all of those in some form fuel the PvP of nullsec, right? Rorquals are a great example. Say what you will about their balance, about how the numbers are tuned, but tethering PvE to a grid for cycles to make sure that an engaging entity can tackle them and create that spontaneous PvP. That as an idea is good, right? The optimal ratting strategies being something that you can't do aligned to immediately warp out. Those are steps in the right direction, and all of those PvE man-hour taxes fuel engagements. And even something like fueling structures, you still have to move those sinos around and jump the structure or jump the freighters around, and there is a potential danger, albeit very small, but there's a potential danger in those activities. But the way that the drifters were implemented, in the first iteration, all of the fleets were so massive that you couldn't fight them with anything other than structure bombs or supercarrier bombs sitting tethered on a Fortizar. And the fleets were deleted so quickly that no spontaneous engagements could ever have happened. And even if they could have happened, anybody who was capable of taking that engagement was tied up dealing with their own man-hour attacks. It just detracted from the entire pool of potential engagements.
Just
Okay.
a quick answer. Just a
Yeah, go
really
ahead.
quick
Sure,
answer.
go ahead.
I disagree that all man-hour tax mechanics foster PvP. For example, when you think about it, nullsec logistics is man-hour tax, and if you could have given like jump freighters infinite range, so that logistics are much easier, right? But some of the man-hour tax mechanics actually care about overall macroeconomics of EVE.
That's fair. I'll give you that one.
Yeah, so
sure.
I think in the same vein, maybe a man-hour tax to reduce Citadel spam could be good, but not under this implementation.
So I remember my question now.
Good.
So, Olmeca, you pointed out something that I've heard a lot, which is that it should be CCP's responsibility to catalyze PvP. And the issue with this is that it feels to me like a certain amount of absolution of responsibility for those people who are actually doing the PvP. And so I guess my question to everyone, because I keep hearing CCP should come out with PvP content, but yet when they come out with new ships, new structures, new tools, none of these are considered PvP content. So my question is, what exactly are you looking for? Like, CCP is responsible for the universe. That's what they're doing. They're building up the universe. It should be your guys' responsibility to make the PvP happen. You're the P in PvP. CCP is the E in PvE.
So here is what happens in that sense. If so, you're right that in PvP there has to be two sides, and we have to. It's on players to engage in emergent playstyle and go attack people and so on and so forth. But there's the other side to this is whether mechanics support attackers or defenders, and these mechanics aren't coincidental. These mechanics are pushed by CCP, and last 3-4 years they shifted a lot toward the favor of the defender. So it's very hard as an attacker, be it attacker of structures or attacker of ships. It's now, compared to past 4 years, it's very hard to go and kill someone's roll qual or super. And I've seen,
Well,
I'm basing these claims on macroeconomical data. So I'm looking at how much of the mining, for example, converts to kill mails, and I'm seeing it that the data says that much less of an amount actually converts to kill mails, and that's worrying. So CCP can interfere here in the sense that they can change mechanics a bit to favor the attacker side, and it's not like CCP can do nothing about it, and it's completely player choice. CCP can introduce anti-sino mechanics. CCP can diminish a bit more the nullsec respawn rates. So you have to be spreading out your empires a bit. So maybe spread out umbrellas, have multiple umbrellas, so they are more vulnerable, and so on and so forth. CCP has a whole bunch of stuff they can change to catalyze PvP content. It's not only on players to attack each other.
You can't blame a player base for refusing to play optimal. It's up to a developer to make optimal either fun or too difficult to find, so that the game is trying to find optimal.
Well, my point is that so a lot of the things that people have said about this is that they're glassing the sandbox or they're disrupting the sandbox. In my opinion, artificially creating things to force people to fight, putting that responsibility to catalyze PvP on CCP could not be done without disrupting the sandbox.
I'm not
by
saying
definition.
That, I don't think anyone's saying that the sandbox shouldn't be disrupted. I think people are saying that the sandbox should be disrupted in a way that encourages people to interact with each other, rather than.
I assure you that there are a lot of people that are saying that the sandbox should not be disrupted, and they say that the Drifters, for example, is disrupting the sandbox.
I don't think
Alright.
we have any of those in this room.
Okay, let's.
Oh, I think the majority of people are sort of, like this is what I was kind of what I wanted to say with my post was I think a lot of people like the spirit of what the Drifters are doing, but a lot of people don't like the fact that this is a PvE faction that's doing this, and it's not like a war with another player. Like I think a lot of people would be on board if CCP decided to say, "Hey, let's nerf, real cool mining or some other kind of thing that's making the game stale right now, rather than Drifters are just attacking citadels."
Well, they
So-
did all those things first, and nobody really responded to them.
So Humanus87 writes in chat, this is a while ago. Has anybody thought of this as more of a temporary event, like a narrative event? And Ashterothi, you made a compelling case that probably what CCP was thinking was not A, B, or C, but actually D, which is we're going to tell a story. We're going to let invasions come into high sec, and then we'll move drifters into low sec. Like they're trying to tell a narrative story. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I mean, so to me, when I look at this, and granted, we're only at the beginning, so we're all grasping straws, but my particular straw is that this looks exactly like the classic, almost tropey alien invasion storyline, right? So the key to this is that the Drifters, all of the things that people complain about Drifters, what stands out to me is that those things are not necessarily the same with things like the Triglavians and the Diamond Rats, like, for instance, the lack of D-scan. So you can descan those other elements, but you can't descan the Drifters. That implies to me that there's a certain amount of we aren't supposed to be able to beat them at this phase. It's supposed to be the alien that's coming in with so much power, so much technology, so overwhelming that it's like, well, what are we going to do? The world's over. And then from there, we build up, we gain our own foothold of things. We start taking their technology, using it against them, and by the end of the story, we are basically their equals. That's what it feels like to me, but of course, we're going to have to see how it plays out.
You
Okay,
can
well,
introduce lore without making it unfun.
Well, it was Ron's having a great time, so it depends on who you are. Okay, listen. Let's talk about the next part of the story is that the Drifters come in, they raid. It's unpredictable. It's a little bit unnerving, and now they're going to knock the power out, so you won't be able to see local in nullsec space. So the net result is that players will not be able to see each other in space through the local channel like they normally could, unless the person volunteers to put themselves on there by typing. That's like wormholes. What do you guys think of that?
I really think this is going to be a cool experiment over, however they do it. They say July in the dev blog. They do things on Wednesdays now. So my assumption is it's probably going to last for about 3 weeks. So at least I guess that'll be long term enough without it being like super annoying, where they can actually get some good data about like not having any local. I think one of the biggest concerns that there has been for a long time from the community is botting, and this is just gonna make it so just the bots can't function for the rest of the month once CCP turns off local, which is pretty funny. I know like turning off local and local chat has been like one of the things that's been like argued for ages. Like it's so like a decade old, really, right? Like it's the same with like the nerf AFK cloaking and and all of these other sort of like arguments that all sort of come around the local as an intelligence tool. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think a lot of people are all sort of on this, or I'm just gonna, we're just gonna go hunt in enemy space, and it's gonna be a fun 3 weeks where we just roam and kill people. But there's been a lot of whining and tears on the forums. I mean, there always is on the forums. Like, the raw call nerf that we just had, there's something like 900 people posting about how it's a horrible change, even though, I think the change was quite tepid and needed for the health of the game, especially if you look at the MER and you understand like how the macroeconomics work in EVE. So there's always going to be whiners on the forums, but it seems like there was like a huge amount of it this time around too.
So Suitonia, one of the things, and I'm sure most people know that you stream, and it's a great stream. I love it. Two of the things that you do, a lot of solo roaming in nullsec, which isn't really kind of common because it's extremely difficult to do. And roaming around in a thrasher cracks me up, and you're still killing stuff. But also the small gang warfare. So, how does that relate to Blackout and how you're going to change your ways? Like I've seen your methods, going into a system, quickly descanning and rolling to the next one. Are you going to be relying on dotland more? Are you going to be looking at MERS more, or how do you think it'll change?
I think people are going to have to rely. I think you're going to have to spend a lot more time per system. Obviously, right now, I think if you're like a scout or like a solo player, normally you jump in the system, you take a look at local. If there's no one in there, you just walk to the next gate. If there's like 3 people in there, once you start roaming like a region of space for a while now, you kind of get to know the people that are there. You know who's in a VNI, who's just a perma-docked character that's just farming skills, who's a guy who's docking up as soon as you come in, so you might as well move on, etc. Without local, I think roams are going to take a lot longer because you're going to have to spend a lot longer per system because you're going to have to like descan systems. There's some like pretty like funky systems too that because the descan range is only 14 AU. There are some like big systems. Like I know Test has one that's next to, is it like GTAC Y? I think it is. I'm not sure if it's like CZ or something like that. You have like a system that's like 140 AU wide, so it's like a massive pain in the ass if there's no local to like check every single planet and see if anyone's actually there. It's gonna be a huge buff, I think. I think you're gonna be able to catch a lot more sort of ratters and people who rely only on local. And I think like intel is going to be a lot more important. I think it's going to be a lot more important to be on comms with your alliance. So I think a lot of people, they log in a VNI. There's a lot of people in Dell, for example, who have like never even installed Mumble, and they're in Karma Fleet and they just rat in a Vex and AV issue or something. And I think you're going to see a lot more people, especially those people who died while goons are on deployment, especially on the first day. I think you're going to see a lot more of that, like people just dying because they're not active in their own alliances.
That's actually a really great point about the really big systems, right? And to cover that in a 14 AUs is just going to take 5 or 6 jumps. And so Olmeca, speaking about hunting, right? That's something that you do a lot. Excavators, but you also do hunting of ratting ships, and you do all that kind of stuff. And one of the tools that you use is cloaky camping. And cloaky camping, of course, I mean, I don't think it's the devil, but it's probably the devil's brother. But how do you think the blackout will change cloaky camping and that sort of kind of play style? Well, I think it'll be more powerful, don't you think?
I agree. When you listen to Falcon, he always tied cloaky camping to local changes. So maybe after this change, there could be a nerf. If this change is permanent, and I cannot speak to cases where it's permanent or temporary because of the NDA, but so I will assume that it's permanent and talk about that. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to suddenly log off my cloaky campers just because there's no local. It's actually more advantageous for us to watch ships now this time, except they don't know we're in local. They probably know because we keep scanning camping delve all the time. But also the cloaky camping, I think it divides the two. So the way I do it in umbrella regions, where people don't rely on local as much. In other regions, people rely on local a lot, so they dock when cloaky campers appear, and now maybe they will undock or they will not know that they are being camped. So there's that kind of funky mechanic there. I'm not sure. And but for us, so our mechanics, Suitonia spoke about like small gang roaming and so on and so forth. And for big whaling stuff, I can tell one of the big changes is we can now, I think, stage capitals and systems without being seen or noticed, which is I think which will be great for us at least. Like Naglfars and Dreads and so on and so forth. For big Dread bombs, you can find an empty system and stay off the scan and light your signer for 1 minute and then it's gone. So if people are not paying attention for 1 minute, then you have now this huge Dread force without. It's like almost like Covertop's Dread bomb, right? So that's good for us at least. But the main thing I'm worried about all this stuff is basically whether the risk reward, if this is permanent, risk reward kind of shifts too much to the risky side and people merely just dock, which is what I expect from this thing actually.
Yeah, that's the major concern, right? No, I don't think anybody thinks that this is a nerf in terms of nullsec content. But the question is, what effect will it have? Has the player base been existing in a bubble of safety too long that the 2012 Eve player just doesn't exist anymore? All of the people that have been championing for this change for the last 10 years, do they still play? Are they willing to come back? Is nullsec dense enough for this to play out, or is the extra time in between systems going to just be too long? It's going to be an interesting experiment for sure.
Oh, what's actually really funny is I've actually this last 2 weeks of this weird stuff going on. I've had so many people who have quit the game in the last year and a half, message me on Discord and actually be interested in EVE again and ask what's going on, is CCP deliberately doing this, etc. So I think at the very least, I know the thread actually hit the front page of Reddit about CCP deleting local, which is kind of awesome. So I think it's actually bringing a lot more
The
people
front page of all of Reddit, you're saying?
Yeah, it was on the front page of Reddit. So if you just browse the front page of Reddit, you don't necessarily have a subscription to EVE. It would still potentially come up.
That's a big deal. So it's not just our EVE, our little Reddit that we have. It's like the entire Reddit. I guess it became so active. In other words, it was such high profile that it put it up on the whole site's, all of Reddit's thing. That's really significant.
There were also some mainstream articles at PC Gamer that were a big deal. And, I know that those got a lot of traction. And funny, they're just saying in chat that Jeff Rader is resubscribed. But, that kind of goes over to Elise. And I mean, I don't know how many years the delete local has been a meme, but it's been all of them that I remember. And but what's interesting is they call it delayed local, but it's still wormhole, right? It's still, you're not going to show up. So I was wondering what you thought about that, Elise.
Does my mic work? Yeah, it totally works. So the phrasing of delayed local is super dumb, but it's something that they've been going on with EVE forever, right? They already always call it delayed chat. But whatever. Semantics aside, they should just say, yo, local's gone, YOLO. There are a bunch of people, as you mentioned, Ron. There's a ton of people that are taking interest in EVE again, and I guess Suitonia as well, where people are on my Steam friends list. They're like, "Oh, hey, I heard CCP did something ridiculous. Is this true? Are they finally getting their balls back?" That's
Right.
they're saying that. That's not me trying to put a spin on it. And I'm like, weird way to pose a question, dude, but yeah, this is actually real, this is happening, blah blah blah. And they're coming back on alphas. They're whelping ships in low sec. They have no idea what's going on, but they're having a good time. So by all accounts, that's kind of a good thing. I'm a bit skeptical about the whole local blackout thing just because they're calling it temporary, right? So that's not what you want, right? Like, you don't want to come out when you're doing this whole spooky fucking ghost thing and be like, hey, this is just temporary, don't worry.
Yeah,
Because that
sit it
just gives
out.
people the opportunity, to just sit it out. And I don't know if many people will do that because they'll be looking at their friends and their friends will be like, oh man, I'm still making all this ISK. This whole blackout thing was all a ruse to mess with the puppies, blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think indefinite temporary is inherently flawed, though. I mean, this is one of those things that there really isn't any data that you can go off of to make a data-driven decision. It's sort of just one of those, we think it's going to be a good idea. There are enough people that think it might be a good idea. You just got to try it at some point, see how it does, and then look back and look at the data then to see how well it did.
And
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
That kind of goes back to my initial just takeaway from talking to CCP Burger in Toronto. His whole just his whole view of things is, hey, just try something. The worst that could happen is you can just revert it. Like, it's not going to blow up. It's not going to explode in your face. If it's bad, you can just say, oh shit, well, this was bad, guys. And that's sort of the mentality it seems that CCP are taking in terms of a lot of these changes.
Well, if they ran last week's Drifters, the 24/7 hitting everybody 400 times a day, you run that for a month, you will actually kill it. Like there is the potential to go too far in a bad direction.
Yeah, sure. Hold on. You said something that's very interesting to me, and I think this is one of the overarching themes that has really called out to me. Elise, you said, did Eve? Somebody asked you, did Eve find their balls again? And basically, that tells me that a lot of people who are sitting on the sidelines of EVE Online are basically like, the company's not doing anything to really create a game that mixes it up more, either with the environment or with players. Like, it's not exciting, it's not scary anymore. That points to something, doesn't it? Like an underlying dissatisfaction with the status quo.
I think so too, and it's kind of like this is more of a broader topic, right? So unfortunately, we're kind of derailing a little bit here, but I think it's kind of important. There's a lot of talk of what do gamers want? What can EVE do to get that type of gamer and get more populous? Because everyone knows, like, the more people playing EVE, the better. And so I see a lot of people saying, oh, just make it friendlier, make it like these little things will make it easier for new players. And they just wax on and on about what it is that new players want. You don't want those players, though. That my thing has always been, like, you don't want the Fortnite gamers who can spend 40 minutes playing your game, right? You want those MMO players that get super invested. They throw their entire heart into a game that'll stay around for years and years and years, that are happy to put hours and hours into a game because they believe in what can come out of it and they believe that their time is worth something. You don't want these these dudes that are just like, they'll play for an hour, get some good fights, and then peace off. Like, you don't want that in your game. And so CCP, it did feel for a lot of people that CCP played it a little bit too safe. They tried to appeal to a wider audience, to make it more user friendly, to do things that other games were doing, and they kind of just lost a little bit of what made them special when they were starting out, which is these guys that would just do insane stuff that made no sense, but it was cool. It made the game spooky. It made the game hard. It made you feel like you were playing a hardcore game that not everyone could participate in.
Yeah, I used to, when I'd get killed, I would look around and say, like, you cheated. That was my first thought, because there's no way you could have done that. And then it turns out, no, they could have done it. They just knew how to do it. That kind of stuff was really what comes to mind. People who've left are the people that can't find the invigoration to be creative in the game anymore, because everything's kind of established now. And this leads to the larger themes of, hey, we know how to win this game. First of all, you create a giant umbrella to protect miners that can generate enough ISK to create more miners and create big titans. And then you have a giant fleet that can't be stopped because you have 1,000 titans going up into one region and taking over. And now Test was doing that, Fraternity's doing that, and now even NCPL are doing that. And the guys that weren't doing that have been starving for a few years.
I just want to clarify something a little bit. Someone in Twitch chat, Gideon Stern, said, "Are you saying that people who don't have all the time in the world to play Eve are unwelcome?" No, that is not it at all. I want everyone in the world that likes to play video games, especially with a sci-fi theme and MMOs. I want them to play Eve. I want them to play the shit out of Eve, even if they only can play like 3 hours a week. I want them to always play. But I don't think that you should design your game based on attracting gamers who can explicitly spend 40 to 50 minutes in a gaming session. There's a difference, right?
Well, there's stuff for them now too.
Yeah, nobody is unwelcome, right? But you don't want to have the core of your game balance be, oh, we want these 40-minute gamers real bad. Like, no, it's great if they come, right? If they come and they find something that gets them hooked, that's fantastic. But you want to cater to the people that are you want to cater to MMO gamers that like sci-fi and EVE Online's like gritty dark outlook. You don't want people that just like to play video games.
Right.
And that's
okay.
sort of like
Ron,
a design thing, right? Between like World of Tanks, which is like a 15-minute gamer thing, and MMOs, which are much longer than that.
All right. So we're going to wrap up with one more topic that I want to get to. What I want to first say is that if you want more information on drifters, check out Thursday's or the next Talking Station podcast by Artemis and Ron. They're going to dive into the details about drifters and blackouts and get into the nitty gritty about how things look like they're going to work. So check that out. Every midweek we have a show that really breaks down stuff that is going on technically in the game. Whereas the Sunday show is going to be larger themes and stuff like that. Okay, so the last question I have to bring up is the cartel from nullsec is going to put the pain onto highsec. So this is weird, right? And we just saw the leader of NC. Vince, on the Meta show with the Matani, and they're both talking about the situation, much of the stuff that we talked about, but that is a symbol of what's happening now, and that nullsec has gotten together to basically say we're unified in a lot of the stuff that's going on against us with drifters, but we're going to put the pain on highsec. So Elise, I wanted to throw it to you. This is not unusual. It's happened before historically. Can you tell us about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so the last time it really happened was with Technetium, right? So for the longest time, 3 groups owned 80% of all the Technetium in New Eden. And this isn't hyperbole. It's actually, they did own 80%, right? So between PL Goons and NC. They held 80% of the Technetium just because of how Technetium was spread about. Lowsec, the north, and a little bit in Fountain. The rest was kind of like sprinkled out in drone lands, and everyone had their own like little piece of it, but whatever. So nullsec guys came together and said, hey, you know what would be real funny? If we just set a price and we made everybody go ahead and just agree with it, because what options do they have? And that's when the whole idea behind OTEC started. And it was just put a price limit or a price cap, an agreed price rather, for Technetium, and we all agreed that we wouldn't have a certain supply, or we'd match a certain supply, blah, blah, blah. Made the prices skyrocket. Everyone got rich. Everyone loved it. It was really funny. The funniest part were the people in the Evo forums. And I feel bad if you were one of these people, but we laughed at you at your expense. We just sat there and read the forums to each other. We got clips of people crying about how it was breaking the game, and we laughed. And that's kind of like a very Eve thing, right? To sit with your enemies and laugh at the tears of other people who you don't know.
You think
and
that's
it
what's happening?
happened.
Oh, go ahead.
I do believe that's exactly what's happening on this one, because it's a good way to make a lot of money. The tiers are always going to be really funny. The tiers are already starting, right? There's people in highsec that are like, oh, screw you nullsecers. You guys don't even know what's going on. You're so dumb. Ha ha ha. Like, there's just a whole bunch of people that are just already kind of blowing this out of proportion, right? But it's fun to do, right? It's a fun thing to kind of meme with. It's going to make a lot of people a lot of money. I'm sure Aerith is going to like triple in net worth because he knows how this is going to affect everything.
Was there anything before OTEC, or was OTEC the first time?
So OTEC was actually the second one. The third one, you could argue, was Bot Lord, which is where us and Goons and NC kind of came to an agreement over. We kind of put a cartel on space ownership. So if anyone else tried to open up space, we'd kind of muscle them out together, and we'd agree not to attack one another's space. So that was kind of the latest one. Then there was OTEC before that, and we're going in the way back machine here. There is a group called NAGA, and NAGA were quote unquote independent. They weren't necessarily independent, but people didn't know that. And it was essentially the only way where you could get Tech 2 ships with any form of reliability. Because Tech 2 BPOs are still super rare. No one really knew how to get them. The market was pretty shitty. A lot of things weren't even on the market. They'd go on and immediately go away. But the biggest group that were outside of any alliance was this group called Naga. And if you had a Tech 2 BPO, but you didn't have the ability to produce from it, you could give it to them, and they were trusted enough that they would build from it, give you a section of the profits, and you could just make money passively off of your sweet lottery winnings in this Tech 2 BPO. And they were they were very much a cartel, right? That no one else had anything similar to that. They spanned through all groups. Like Band of Brothers had people in there, AAA had people in there. Just basically anyone could put their T2 BPO in there, and they would sell to basically everyone.
Ron?
I think it's really interesting that the whole kind of the embargo, or the raid on HiSec. HiSec has been, like the center of the kind of, the JITA, right? Is like the center of all of these conflicts and resolutions. I don't know, how successful they'll be, right? But, what's interesting is that Dran, immediately after, Matani kind of made these announcements and this and that, Dran, was talking a little bit about, oh, well, we're not sure either. So, Dran, any updates?
Well, we're still not really sure exactly how things are going to go. Like, a lot of people don't realize that upper level Null politics is not smoky back rooms and people getting together in real life over dinner and making deals. It's just a bunch of idiots in a Discord talking at each other intermittently. Like, so, the terms of a deal or the terms of an embargo, like that's all still in the very preliminary stages. Some entities have already stopped exporting to HiSec. Entities like Test, we observed the kind of first people to bite in doing it, and fear that without doing it ourselves, we might end up at a worse position, right? Like, some people just want to get rich. Some people want to send a message to CCP by punishing HiSec. Some people want to punish HiSec for being HiSec, right? Regardless of whatever motivates people to do it, enough people are doing it. And we feel that it's important to build a local first economy to make sure that we don't end up without one if we need it, right? It's always easy to just say, okay, well, we overreacted. It doesn't look like anything's happening. Feel free to continue exporting everything as you do normally. Then to, oh crap, things are going very, very poorly. We can't even build maelstroms anymore. You guys need to stop exporting right now. So I think a lot of the nullsec reactions are mostly that rather than the malicious or scheming type. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and if whether or not participants are actually going to be willing to do this embargo. Because remember, in every previous iteration, it was very, very easy to control the flow of minerals because of the passive generation, and then just having a few individuals dump them to cans and then export them around. Right now, you have to have people physically mining the stuff. People have renters mining the stuff. People have, corps that they've sold moons to instead of doing things at the alliance level. So actually, running a physical cartel just assuming everybody even wanted to, is a logistical nightmare now. It'll be really interesting to see how it plays out.
I mean, the thing is, you don't even have to have it play out. It's just the threat of it playing out is what makes you the money.
You're not wrong there.
And then you can just laugh and say, ha ha ha, hi suckers, we tricked you, you're so dumb. It's a literal win-win situation. Either it works or it doesn't and you make money on it. And you get to laugh and just bloviate a little. So it's one of those situations where you enter and you win no matter what happens. And this is what I think the most successful EVE Online groups and leaders do. They position themselves in such a way where there is no loss.
Yeah, they claim victory either way. I've noticed that very much in the last few years. If they can always find a victory scenario, it's always defined after the fact, not before, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, we're going to run into time crunch now. I got to go. I just got roped into going to the pool because I was distracted with the show. So I blame you guys. But let's do last comments. If you guys have anything else, something you can't let go this week or next week. We'll start with Dran.
Oh, sorry, you cut out again. Say that again.
Oh, we're in the last comments here. Is there anything you can't let go? Something you want people to know or something you want to make people aware of?
Yeah, just in case anyone didn't know, this is a really new thing in test. We've got this corp Dreddit, and they have just opened recruiting again. So if anybody wants to get in on this sweet nullsec content, Dreddit is indeed.
That is wild. I never thought I would see the day where that would happen.
Ron?
A shout out to Team Drifter and the Drifters in general. They're the VIPs right there.
Oh yeah, and I hope Ron steps on a leg of that too. Can't be that.
We'll have you guys brawling in the back room. Olmeca, any last thoughts? Something you can't let go? Something you want looking forward to?
Yeah, so I want to tell the people who potentially voted for me, we're cautiously optimistic about CCP making nullsec dangerous again, but also be wary of these changes. Some of them are not going to, in the long term, not going to be the kind of changes you might want to see in the game.
Right. Elise, Randolph, is there anything?
I just want to give a big shout out to the organizers of EVE North. I was kind of like touting them a little bit earlier. They did an amazing job, and there were a few really cool things that you could check out. It's on the CCP YouTube, speeches that were made and stuff like that. So give it a shout or give it a check out. It's #worth. Really cool stuff, and they did an amazing job.
And thank you for going there and representing TIS and doing some interviews and that kind of stuff. Really appreciate it. Suitonia?
There's a tournament next week as well, Saturday and Sunday. It's a solo 1v1 PvP tournament, which I think is eve-cs.twitch.tv where it's going to take place. It's like a 12 billion-isk prize pool. So that should be fun.
It's now 30 or something because I paid 10 billion too.
Oh, nice. So it's like
wow.
30 bill.
Awesome. And finally, Ashterothi, last words.
Yeah, I've got a couple of I've got a PSA, which is that the Triglavian invasions do seem to be changing at least a little bit and becoming more aggressive. We are seeing anchoring Damoviks, which are the Scrammers, and Zoria Lashaks in the roaming packs, which means on gates in all of the systems, including the perimeter systems. So stay safe out there. It is they are pretty rare, but they do definitely come out and play. Also, for those of you who are running conduits, we have noticed that now roaming packs can warp into the conduit while it is being run. While we still have not seen any Triglavians enter into a sealed conduit, while the fight is going on, reinforcements can warp in from the outside, and this can escalate it to being 2 to 3 times harder than your average conduit. So be prepared for that. And then finally, I want to say that if you're interested in all this stuff and you want to know more and you want to keep caught up, please check out Air Talker Research Consortium and the discourse on YouTube. These guys have been on the forefront of monitoring this whole situation for at least several years, and has been rapidly putting out updates, often before even the scope manages to. So it is well worth your time to be starting to pay attention to at least the active going-ons of the universe, because as it seems, they can come to strike at you now.
Awesome. All right. And don't forget to watch Talking in Stations this Thursday, as Artemis and Ron and Silver will put on a different show about drifters and the blackout and get into some of the details there. Listen for that podcast as well. Look for our chill streams that happen in the mornings. That would mostly be me. And of course, our Wormhole show with Exuki, the new CSM member who's going to represent Wormhole Space. Look out for that programming coming to you from Talking in Stations, including the universe and other podcasts that are going to be joining us as affiliates and partners. So check out all that content coming your way this season as we kicked off today, season 3. We're glad to be back. We will have a lot for you as all this stuff progresses. Right now, we're going to shoot you over to Joe Bain if you want to stick around, you 400 people who've stuck with us this whole time. I want to thank everybody in the audience, X Hoffman, for putting up so many subscribes to people over the weeks. And thank you all for all the contributions and all the chat that you guys develop over time. I love seeing you guys here. Remember, 24 hours a day, you can join TIS Discord and be a part of the conversation as it progresses. I want to thank everybody for coming on. Dran, Olmeca, Suitonia, and my cohorts, Ron, Elise, and Ashterothi. Thank you guys for putting together a great show. And of course, the guy who ties it all together with graphics, McLeod. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. That's all that we have this week. We will see you next time on Talking in Stations.